Good evening, good day to everyone in the room and online. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you from Juba today and just put a little bit of a spotlight on the situation for people fleeing the war in Sudan. The humanitarian situation at the South Sudan border is at a critical juncture, and we really do fear a hunger emergency is looming if humanitarian agencies are unable to scale up the responses as needed. People crossing the border are arriving with harrowing stories of escape as they've made their way to South Sudan. Robberies, sexual violence, and long journeys on foot with no food or water. By the time these families arrive in South Sudan, their resources have been completely depleted and they are already well on the way to a hunger emergency. The recent data collected by our WFP shows that 90% of families have gone multiple days without eating and are experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity on arrival. 1 in 5 children and more than 1/4 of all mothers who have been screened at the border are malnourished. Almost 300,000 people have crossed so far from Sudan into South Sudan since the conflict started more than 5 months ago. And upwards of 1,000 people continue to arrive each day. The families that we see crossing today are even more vulnerable and food insecure than those that arrived in the early weeks of the conflict, and it's getting worse. Over 90% of the people arriving are South Sudanese, arriving at the border crossing points with a desire to move further onwards to family and homesteads further inside South Sudan. Onward transportation is difficult. The only viable modes are river that is fraught with challenges and expensive air solutions. Joda Renk is the main crossing point, and Renk is over 1,600 kilometers from Juba. Access is challenging in the best of times, but most particularly in the rainy season, making the response much more complex. An already difficult humanitarian situation is exacerbated by the ongoing rainy season. Because of the heavy rains, flooding has wiped out roads and created severely waterlogged conditions twice in the past few weeks. And the local communities or host communities are not immune to this. They have been severely impacted by this flooding, with over 4,000 of them displaced. The mud and stagnant water in the makeshift camps where people stay while awaiting onward transportation is a perfect breeding ground for disease, which is contributing further to hunger and malnutrition, especially amongst the youngest children, who are the most vulnerable. Currently, there are around 12,000 people in the transit centre waiting for onward transport, with new arrivals every day, and over 3,000 people at Paluch waiting also for transport and are in dire need of support. WFP is supporting the newly arrived families with everything we have available: hot meals, high energy biscuits, dry rations, and cash-based transfers. We are screening young children and mothers for malnutrition and providing treatment or preventative support as required. But all this is only meeting the most immediate needs of these families, and the rations we are able to provide are 50% of what they should be. Many of the returnees have lived in urban areas of Sudan for years, decades, or even generations. The areas they are returning to in South Sudan are unfamiliar and largely rural, agricultural-based communities. Coming from urban environments, many of the families do not have the skills needed to build livelihoods for themselves, and they have missed the growing season for this year. And this means not only do they need food today, but they also require longer-term support as they try to rebuild their lives. Before the war in Sudan and the tragedy it has caused, the situation in South Sudan was already desperate, with sadly over 7.4 million people estimated to be food insecure. Many of the communities people are returning to are also facing humanitarian crises of their own, driven by the conflict, the climate crisis, and soaring food prices. So far, we have registered over 220,000 returnees arriving in some of the most food insecure zones of the country. They are fleeing the dangers of war to a situation of absolute despair. WFP is struggling to address the immediate needs of the returnees let alone help them to build a sustainable future. This year, WFP received less than half the funding that we needed, and the outlook for next year is looking equally concerning. Simply put, half the funding translates into half the food assistance. In order to reach as many people as possible, WFP slashed rations to 50%, meaning people receive less than 300 grams of food per day. And this includes the people arriving from Sudan. Continuing in this manner means that we will be unable to break the cycle of entrenched hunger in South Sudan and provide a way out for the families facing extreme hunger. We are barely pulling people back from the cliff edge of desperation. And while we do not expect the funding outlook for 2024 to drastically improve, we implore the global community to remember that just barely saving lives is not enough. We need durable solutions that will assist the returnees to South Sudan and the South Sudanese in the deepest trenches of food insecurity to build their own livelihoods and live a dignified life free of this persistent hunger. This will mean supporting communities to adapt farming practices and introduce climate-smart agriculture, investing in peace-building programs, and improving infrastructure so communities can withstand and cope with the numerous shocks. WFP has seen the successes that are possible in South Sudan when people are given opportunities and the tools needed to succeed. Despite the growing humanitarian crisis at the border with Sudan, if these families can be supported to resettle in their communities and rebuild their broken livelihoods, then all hope is not lost. We need to bring this hope and possibility to the many children and the thousands of families who are fleeing the war in Sudan and making an arduous journey to safety. They deserve and require our support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen McGroarty, the WFP's Country Director in South Sudan. If anybody has a question, please, Evelyn, go. Evelyn. Yeah.
I can see you, but I can't see our guest.
Well,
But
we're
anyway,
having technical difficulties, and please keep the mic.
But anyway, welcome. On behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, my name is Evelyn Leopold. You talked about onward transportation to where is one question. And the second is, many years ago, I did visit Juba. And I wonder, is the government functioning at all there now? Does it have any role?
Mary Ellen?
Thank you.
Yep.
The onward transportation, yes, said over 90% of the people that are coming are actually South Sudanese citizens, returnees. Many of them are looking for onward transportation to the original place of family, origin, homestead. Many of what we're seeing coming at the moment are going into the Upper Nile, Unity State, Wales. So I mean, it's right across the country where they are returning to, because many of them, I mean, there's quite a large population of South Sudanese in Sudan. In Juba, the government, we constantly call on the government to step up on the humanitarian assistance side. We do have to, of course, commend the huge welcome that is given to the people that are returning from Sudan, and it's not only returnees but also refugees. But yes, definitely, much more needs to be done on their side in terms of supporting with the transport and supporting with the humanitarian effort. Over.
Your mic.
Where would the onward transport go? Back to Sudan or to which country?
Yeah, the onward transport would mean coming in. They're coming in up the very north of South Sudan, the place called Renk. So it's basically onward transport to places like Malakal, to places like Bentu, places like Wau, and places like Bahar Ghazal, and even some looking to come as far as Juba.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Is there any other question? Or anybody online? So, okay. With this, I thank you so much, Mary Ellen McGroarty, the World Food Programme's Country Director in South Sudan. Thank you for your time.